Hello. I've decided to... I've had the channel for a time, and I had some videos up, but I'm starting over. I'm going to do it again. To make this channel, to begin making content, putting these videos out. For a myriad of reasons, because I love the arts, and I'd like to consider myself a raconteur, and having something to offer the world at large. But primarily it's to process my relationship with Quentin Tarantino. I am the reason that Quentin canceled his film, The Movie Critic. And now we're in a very dangerous condition psychologically. The both of us are. And it's a long story, and there's no need to go on and on about it now. But I've written a novel about it. It's called Building a Coven. So I've decided to structure these in a particular way, and I have to get my guitar. 1 second. And so I'm a musician. I'm a writer. I'm an actor. I wrote Quentin about playing the lead in The Movie Critic. And so having written this novel, I've decided to read it. Right? I'm going to read portions of it. I'm going to read all of it, 130,000 words over the course of however many videos. And we'll talk about, then I'll talk about the writing, where I was at, when the things that are occurring on the page, right, actually in the world, what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it. I'll say setting out that there's only perhaps 130,000 words. No, there's 130,000 words total, pardon me. There's only about 150 pages of what could be considered a final draft, though it's not a final draft. But I have a lot of material, and we can all be on the journey together. It's always been my hope that there's a place in Quentin's heart for reconciliation, right? And I know that it's my fault, right? The primary reason that I'm not already, right, known to the world in relation to Quentin is because of me. I made a mistake, right? I blew it, right? I'm a loser. I'm the loser in this formula. However, right, it's a complicated condition that has come to define both of our lives forever. Doesn't matter what he says. And so the novel is called Building a Coven, as in a witch's coven. Right? And so I'll begin with reading the first section right now. On magic. Of course magic is real, and anyone who argues to the contrary is an oblivious fool. The mind is the greatest instrument, whose mutability is as wide as the horizon. The mind of man is the mind of God. There is only one mind, omnipresent in every cubic centimeter of space. As with all instruments, the more it is played, the more it is understood. Analyzing and categorization have their place, but analyzing degrades by simplification. The the absolute, transcends all languages or attempts to codify. A reality above criticism. All ideas are quantum foam, constantly seething and mutating into potential archetypes of manifestation. It is will and intention that guides the amorphous collective. Which came first, thought or motion? Is consciousness an accident of motion? An evolving static memory embossed upon all of space? Or is mind the progenitor of all things? Presupposing the latter, that fine-tuning indicates design. With mind being the designer, knowing by inference of faith the unfolding of a divine plan, the instrument of reason takes on new importance. Knowing that mind permeates all, which is the source of all individual consciousness, the adept will see the path to wisdom. The highest expressions of magic must, by default, be the laying of hands and prayer. Miracles have occurred long after Jesus, if you're looking for them. Talbot espouses on it in no small detail in the holographic universe. The suggestion being that consciousness can tap into its connection throughout all space, which has the information of all creation within it, and heal the wounded and sick. Stories of nuns taking cancer into their bodies, not eating or drinking for decades, the placebo effect. These tactics hearken to the unity of things, that together we are stronger than apart by our communion and fellowship. On the other side of heaven, the shadow. These forces that might be used to lift you up and soar with the angels might too be put to mechanical ends. Pure expressions of force, of desire, of will. You could capitalize all of them if in their secrets you see totems of veneration. Both sides must be necessary, as the earth is marred with epochs of pestilence as well as prosperity. So too must mind be filled with caverns of darkness as well as beacons of light. A sigil is a talisman of power. When crafted by the hands of an adept, the shadow reaches across the world and binds. An orgone collector manufactured by a robot in a factory yields little to nothing beyond intellectual intrigue. However, that same orgone collector, part and parcel, when crafted by hand, suspends divine resonance within it and projects it out into creation. The compass and straight edge, square, from the brow of Mount Moriah, are by necessity the finest scientific instruments that can ever be, as they always deliver absolute truth, lawful, unlawful, and the infinite space between, bounded in a nutshell. Casting spells, spelling, grimoire, grammar. You can sum it up by saying that magic and sorcery, ESP, remote viewing, all of these things are conscious conjurations of electrical fields. Magic is done in the light, sorcery is done in the dark. These electric fields of intention are coagulated by mind. They can be used to fortify the self. They can be given out. They can be harvested naturally or stolen through wicked conspiracy. So the practitioner, magician, and sorcerer alike conspires through their will to sap the life force or vitality out of their intended target, as attempting to wield the philosopher's stone, the alchemical transmutation, as far as harvesting or psychic pilfering. On the worst side is psychic warfare, which always leads to destruction if perpetuated. And on the best side is consumption of illness, taken out of the sick and brought into the adept by will alone, or removed completely back into the void. There are many examples of this throughout recorded history, mainly nuns, pious people, holy people, seeking through meditation and contemplation of divinity to take on the sins of the world, so to speak. The stronger the mind, the deeper the reservoir of wisdom and knowledge. The denser the electrical braid of intention will be, the greater the result. Thaumaturgy, telekinesis, psychokinesis all originate by this understanding. You can get it for free, lawfully, by simply going to church. When pious people lift up their hearts to God, and you are in need of extra life force, those rooms are always, if sincere, overflowing with devotion and life force, offered up in prayer and communion with the deity. The other side, pure black magic sorcery, is a conscious effort to engender a physiological spike in all cohesive biorhythms to harvest the discharge or destroy the target and fortify the adept thereby. Example, pure conjecture, pure hypothesis. Say a husband and wife are newly married, and the husband is a famous filmmaker, and they're real hip, sophisticated, sexually enlightened wife-swapping types. And though some might know, most do not know, that they are both savage psychics. While shooting his film, the lead actor, a notorious playboy who thinks he's cool and maybe is a sweet-natured guy on some level, but is largely a horse's ass, gets a crush on the new wife because she's as fine as any woman can be. So lead actor Jackass comes to psychic writer-director and says, "Hey man, your wife's real hot. Can I have her?" Filmmaker smiles and pats him on the back, knowing said actor is incapable of exerting any real influence over her, and says, "Sure, buddy. What's mine is yours." And though filmmaker never says it, he thinks, "And what's yours is mine." The other side of this is that young exotic wife tells filmmaker she wants to fuck actor, which makes the end game far more sinister. But in any event, however it transpired in terms of their come together they did. And when she put that magic on him, just a morsel, just 2%, a whisper of her prowess, he gets swallowed immediately, lost in that tantric sexuality, imbued with psychic mind manipulation, and he's on her. Texting. Always wanted to see her all up her ass and making it weird. Until husband and wife hatch a plot to see him understand where he fits into the equation and what they think of him and his efforts to divide the two of them. So she dumps it all on him. Blasts him with a wild, dense braid of lust and infatuation. Fucks him multiple times a day for, say, a week. Spins him all the way up beyond the firmament Ein so far, to where all he sees is her. All he knows is that she wants to be with him. And then resting on that cloud of biorhythm spike, they conceive a baby, husband and wife, and announce it in front of everyone who had been watching him chase her after her like a horny teenager. And when his humiliation and embarrassment spikes his hormones, and his neurological activity spikes in novel ways, reduced to a pathetic puddle of shit, husband and wife harvest that excess of life force through intention and fortify the soul of the developing fetus. And when Loverboy spirals into depression and can't give the goods in front of the lens, filmmaker tells him, "Hey dude, it's okay buddy, we'll name the baby after you." An actor congratulates him. Says he's happy and it was never anything, of course, to save face. But under the surface he knows. He thought he was playing a game he never fully understood, and was measurably aged thereby. The other alternative, equally depraved and fucked up, is that actor gives hot wife baby for ritualistic expressions of will, filmmaker fantasy sorcery shit. And when actor gets depressed because he can't talk about it, and he feels like a whore, psychic filmmaker tells him they'll name the baby after him. So the two interpretations of this purely hypothetical example of sorcery is this. It approaches pure evil if she conspired to fuck him and make him fall in love with her. But the likelier outcome, as they are newlyweds, in their honeymoon phase, with cultured sexual appetites, how this could possibly play out in some hypothetical situation would go something like what I just regaled. Where Playboy thought he could hang, and she gave him a whisper. 3% of what her and her husband do all the time. And after she hit him with even that weak whisper of rhapsody and magic, he became instantly addicted. And then it becomes funny. Because he did it to himself. Because he's not actually cool. He just thought he was. It's a subatomic, superatomic condition. All depths, all stratas, all convocations simultaneously. The archetypal engine, ever present. A hologram so perfect in its construction, it is too wide to be expressed physically. The engine is intention. The expression of the knowing through motion into kinetic corruption. Shadows of light. There's a thought. It is known everywhere forever. What the thought is irrelevant. It is a static knowledge. The canvas of space is ever conceiving, ever conceptualizing, ever pregnant with this knowing. Contemplation and conception. A collapse of potential around the subspatial scaffolding. With the increase in density around the astral skeleton, the coagulation of space is too charged and too dense to remain inert and must discharge the divine orgasm, releasing some spectral phantom of the certainty of the absolution of the pure thought through thought force. If all thoughts exist in the celestial matrix, all that openeth up the matrix is mine. Exodus 34:19. And the engine of intention which binds space into kinetic motion is operating as a single field of knowing, permanently braided and diffused to seeming dissolution, however, is supreme, beyond any mechanical expression of its parts. The whole expresses whichever piece is illumined by the light of reason and intent, mutating pressure fields of space, generating electric current through friction, engendering novelty. This is magic. And man's brain is the supreme filter. Man is the end of evolution. There is nothing else manifested that can exceed the reasoning capacity of man. Anything beyond is angelic and therefore not human. Perhaps purple humans live on Alpha Centauri. If we are supposed to find them, we will. They are the same. They are not alien. They are different expressions of man, being the end of evolution by way of recognition of the divinity embedded within all. A sincere reflection of creature towards creator. Impossible until modern man, which, yes, includes cavemen. I often wonder about the first generations where man began standing upright. The old actor's adage, what do I do with my hands? Lots of flailing, primal dancing. And that first one, very interesting. Standing twice as tall as everyone else. He got all the pussy, I'm sure. Or he died twice as fast, being an easier target. But there was a patient zero that betrayed the design of his backbone, his entire life for the first time. Constantly looking up, humiliated by everyone who misunderstood him. Terence McKenna suggests the alchemical child at the end of time. It is the same idea. And eventually, that first man, staring at his hand in the cave at night around the fire, that special night. Some peculiar celestial arrangement, strange astrologies. And he took a bamboo reed, hollow, chewed a mouthful of berries, held his hand against the cave wall, and blew the first artwork into creation. What do I do with my hands? That, like that man, McKenna suggests we're barreling towards the emergence of another strata of that notion. A person who emerges with such novelty of expression that they transmute the entire world. The stakes for the expression of these powers are as meaningful as you make them. If you seek to express malevolence, you should expect to degrade your physical body thereby. And if you seek miracles upon the world, if your motivation is anything less than absolute devotion to divinity, the understanding that by wisdom you can know how the universe works, and through its workings in the mind of man, you express the same thought forces which manifest and transmute all of inert space into manifested reality, then you will fail, or succeed at a terrible price. To pray for the sins of the world, to offer spiritual condolences sincere, however meager, always yield, never seeking anything beyond to assist, to heal, to commune. This is always lawful and accepted without cost, the reason being thus. Man's expression of intention is a creation of an electric field of intention, as with a cell phone. A cell phone is a crude brain. All the innovation stems from primeval primitive awareness, subatomic, superatomic. If a musician plays a violin in the water, if possible, perhaps a waterproof speaker exists, it must. But the scuba diving violinist rakes the bow across the strings. The sound waves ripple out as a sphere in all directions, not linear. No straight lines in nature. Instrumentation reads linear as a result of time, not as a result of the physical condition of the electrical waves, which are always spherical. Always. A thought is also an electric wave. The hardware of the brain coagulates the magnetic and electric body of the thought force, as with the arrangement of the strings and the fingering hand and the conscious field, present unilaterally, pushes the thought out as a wave, as with the sonic vibration, the raking of the bow of the waterlogged violin, radiating out omnidirectionally as a sphere. The constitution of the conjuration always passes through the body omnidirectionally, instantaneously, always seeking its target. God the Father, a locale, a place in time, a place in space, a person buried alive, a child lost in the woods, a spy carrying a MacGuffin, healing the sick, taking on the sicknesses of others. It is all the same thing. The more effort is dedicated to the thought, the higher the expression of the incantation. Example: a farmer wants to see his crops wither away from drought. The first dimension is a simple plea. The second dimension is finding a way to divert water or manufacture water. The third dimension is bringing the village together and all dancing and singing together. The fourth dimension has all of them dancing and an artist drawing out or painting the scene with the field flourishing with an abundance of crops, with the appropriate celestial conditions which exist overhead. And from there, the fifth dimension, the last edge of the pentagram, the mystic medicine man casts a giant pentagram, or some such the like, in the middle of the field with the dancers all around and a fire burning. And for days, until they all drop from exhaustion, they perpetuate their rhythms and chants, as well as ritualistic sex, where all the sexual fluids soak the drawing, no conception conceiving. Gnostic fervor, bringing all conspirators to a rhapsody in magic, blasting the area with fever dreams of intention, drugs, all these things. And lastly, they burn the effigy to sear it into their subconscious. The increase of electrical output, so communal in nature as it radiates out, will, perhaps, act as gravitational nodes in the upper atmosphere, which coagulate water vapor into clouds and rain. Yes. That's the full scope of condition. I have no master, no order to betray, no oath to break, no teacher to supersede. But it is vulgar to say much beyond. All these tricks can be employed just as easily to destroy. It is easier to be cruel. It is easier to destroy. All manifested life crepuscular is barreling forever towards death. It is a push in the right direction, no more. Pushed upon adept and target, all the same. The waveform always finds its target, but always passes first through the adept. Quantum entanglement is the seed of teleportation of thought force. You can push a thought out, and it will find its target eventually, always. However, if you can entangle two disparate locales, you can also create the thought in another location. This is the far more dangerous ploy, and is the highest sorcerer's stone, and I'll say no more about it. Time travel, Nothing is impossible for consciousness. If Walter Russell espouses truth in his sublime philosophy, the continuous two-way universe, and his sublime thought, that all things that were, are, and ever shall be, reside within all of space, seeking their moment of expression with absolute patience, the Catholic Catechism takes on a new level of wonder. As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be. Then to travel in time is simply to bring your divine awareness into that moment, past, present, or future. The greater the depth of understanding, the easier the connection is made. Remote viewing tests often encumber, unnecessarily, the medium to force understanding when the light of truth will never diminish psychic capacity. They put a locale in time, space, or both in a sealed envelope, and then they tell you to tell them what you see. But if the veil is lifted as much as possible, the depth of the view will be all the more clear. It can be alleged that somehow diminishes the psychic capacity by offering details that could inculcate false notions, which is true regarding imagination. However, on the other side of that, the more the medium knows at the onset, the easier the bridge is built. All chemical signatures have their own divine pattern. I would say sigil or symbol. A chemist would say structure or some such. So knowing the pigments used in famous paintings, you can isolate the molecular structure, sigil, of each color. And if you know where the painting was painted, and if you know the celestial condition overhead at the time, you can meditate by focusing first on the painting, then on the molecular structure of the pigments, perhaps a picture of the artist if one exists, as well as the positions of the heavens overhead. This brings the adept into holistic resonance with all the spatial as well as celestial conditions apparent at the time of the creation. This extends to foliage in the area, landscape, atmospheric conditions, structure within all, politics of the time, the language spoken, all sigils, divine roadmaps embedded within all. If you have a map of the town or a picture of the location, you embed as much of the information about the time sought as you can hold within your mind at the same time. And eventually it would become so dense that it dissolves into certainty, and in the psychic crucible of the mind's eye, all of this knowledge suspended perpetually through intention will reveal the target every time. Past, present, future. Undoubtedly, you could simply stare at old photographs and get all the way to the first photos, say 1815 or whenever that was. Optics in paintings extend to, say, the 16th century. But the greater the depth of resonance, the stronger the psychic connection, the stronger the mystical braid. A memory is its own disease. It can be manipulated as a shadow puppet into the mind of the unaware. The mind is a desert wasteland as well as the Garden of Paradise. On the side of light, white magic, a conjuration of this magnitude could ease the suffering of the moment of death, bring joy to the despondent, offer a light. There is no darkness without the absence of light. There is no light without the absence of darkness. On the other side is pinnacle malevolence. The practitioner, the sorcerer, if a piece of information is known, a name, a fact, a face, a moment, then the information is projected through intention as a fabricated elemental, as with Ariel. If thou more murmurest, I will rend an oak, and peg thee in his knotty entrails, till thou hast howled away 12 winters. The Tempest, Act 1, Scene 2. So the oak is the mind of the victim. The spirit is pegged within by intention, and vivisected thereby by the adept. Crowley says, and I paraphrase here, that demon conjuring, elemental conjuring, is the calling of one part of your psyche to another. But it can be done. One person with a keen psychic pulse can implant false impressions of people by their imagination. The more known, the deeper the illusion. Magic is not about controlling the material world, though in bursts it does for a myriad of reasons. But it is a psychological tool to a psychological end more often. Mystics of ages long gone labored day after day after day for the proliferation of the rain, not knowing the chaos of the weather is beyond the understanding of all save God. They labored nonetheless, with some successes, but the tactics. I have a mind, which is God's mind, which is everywhere. By will alone, I seek to see the clouds form and the rain fall. Refinement sees the ages hone the mind. And what was once wide, seeking to carouse the heavens, now is distilled, seeking to control you. So those are the first pages. A couple of flubs. And the whole thing needs to be gone through at least 4 times. But I like those pages a lot. As far as the story and everything that's occurred, everything that's transpired, it sets the reader's expectations, 100%. So, what am I talking about? It's all there, right? Right? That the mind is capable of pushing its awareness out, right? And locking in, right? That your awareness, right, is only as narrow as you allow it to be. You're only ever as ignorant as you allow yourself to be. Socrates, right? You say you know something. I know nothing. But you say you know something. Right? How does it relate to the Movie Critic? Right? Remote viewing is something that's been popular for a long time, as far as the government's tactics of it, the awareness of it in the zeitgeist, even though it's its own subculture. There's people, you're either into it or you're not. It's like red pill, blue pill. You could fucking, right, as far as the indoctrination of science, reductionist materialistic science, right? You could say that space is dead, right? That there's nothing in space, right? That there's only life in complex cellular structure, right? And so what I'm saying in those pages is that the actual genesis, right, of complex cellular life, right, is an abstract intellectual principle, often referred to as God, which exists unilaterally in a perpetual condition of rest, every cubic centimeter of all space, forever, constantly. Right? This is my worldview. Right? Inevitably, you always end up at the chicken or the egg, right? And it's mentioned in those first few pages. Thought or emotion, right? Right? But I am under the understanding, right, that mind permeates all of space, that all of creation is a conscious field, right? And so instances of magic, right, what was referred to as magic and sorcery, that's now referred to as telekinesis, remote viewing, psychokinesis, right? Remote viewing, right? That they're all the same thing, right? That it's tapping into the understanding, right, that space is permeated, right, with a perfectly nested, abstract, geometrical hologram, right? And within that singular hologram, right, is, well, here's 2 examples, right? So this is a circle subdivided into 18, right, where every relationship, right, is connected, right? So there's like 4 dimensions within this, right, where it just keeps collapsing closer and closer, right, by skipping lines, right? You understand? Okay. The second one is this, right? This is the dodecahedron inside of the icosahedron, right? And it is also a compound of 5 cubes. Each of the edges of the pentagrams, the 12 pentagrams, pentagrams that occupy the inside of each of the pentagonal faces are also sides of a square, right? It's a compound of 5 cubes, right? And so there's one square that you can't see. It's kind of hard for me to point it out here, but it's let's see. Yeah, there it is. 1, And you probably can't see this at all. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, but anyway, right? All of these things, and these are two examples of a seemingly infinite variety, right? But they're all nested perfectly together, right? So sublime in their connection, right, that they dissolve into seeming non-existence, right? And they exist in a perpetual state of rest. However, consciousness, right, the expression of that knowing is consciousness, right? Is the divine mind of deity, right? And so deity exists at rest always, forever as well. But eventually seeks to express its knowing and see its perpetual wisdom manifested, right? That life is a material simulation of a nobler spiritual truth, right? That things come into the world from out of their divine abstract origin, right? To grow for a time and then record the knowing of their experience back into the divine mind of God. Walter Russell teaches us that the noble gases are in fact the acacic substance, that they are not matter, that through the mutating pressure fields of conscious pressure upon the hologram, right, which is consciousness, which is God, right, through God's thinking, right, it puts pressure upon the hologram, right, which contracts, it collapses the vector equilibrium, right, it collapses towards singularity, right. And as it's collapsing from the outside in, right, by the conscious pressure of God the Father, God Almighty, of that divine conscious origin to life, right, it engenders electric resistance, right, to the noble gases, right, and so as it continues to collapse, it becomes too dense, right, and it sprays out as an octave of chemical elements, right. And so there's however many of the noble gases, right? And they offer you each 7 or 9 chemical. I think it's 9. 4 on each side, and it's its own wave. It's a long wave, right? Which gives you a different periodic table from the Mendeleev periodic table, right? And so, right, that's how matter first comes into existence through mind, right? And then further consideration mutates it and manipulates it into complex cellular structure, right? Into the mind of man, right? Which again is the end of evolution because it's the only creature, right, that can offer a reflection of God's knowing back upon it, right? Back upon him, back upon her, right? That he brings man into the world that he might acknowledge how he arrived and, right, offer up a moment of appreciation, right? So it's a mirror, it's reflecting. Everything else before man is enslaved to their baser nature. They don't have the luxury of complex thought, though of course domesticated animals make a strong case, on some level, certainly. I have a bunch of animals, right? And so in the spirit of reincarnation, perhaps they come as people because during our spoiling them, they're imbued with a sense of ego, and that compels them, more of a conscious identity, right? But man's capacity for rationale, for reasoning, right, gives you the potential to soar with the angels as far as wisdom, right? Knowledge, right? And bring you closer to God than anything else, right? That's the point, right? Right? And so if we're talking about space travel, right? If we're just talking about like aliens, if I put on a tinfoil hat right now, right? It is the dumbest, most adolescent level of intrigue, right? Or discussion on these matters to assume that some creature has mastered interstellar travel, right? And wants anything to do with anything that we have here, right? They have circumvented all limitations, right? You do not figure out how to travel beyond the speed of light and have any concern for gold or natural resources. There will never be an alien invasion ever, right? And if those things occur, they'll never let us know that they're here, right? This is the strongest logic that anyone, right, can possibly offer regarding extraterrestrial, right, condition. Right? Do I think that they're real? Right? Aristotle said on his deathbed, "I regret removing the earth from its proper place at the center of the universe." Right? And so what I'm saying is that I don't know. I don't know, but what I do know is that if there is complex life, like comparable to man in terms of reasoning and building and making novel things, that they're just different people. It's still their humanity, right? They have a different name for it, right? They have a different religion, they have different words, they have different language, all these things, but there is only one race, the human race, right? Doesn't matter what country you come from, right? Doesn't matter what planet you come from, right? That we represent a strata, a condition, right? Is there such a thing as a satyr? To this Hyperion to a satyr. Right? I don't know, I don't know. But I allege that if there is some sort of half man, half beast, he would be primarily beast. And therefore, in no way comparable, right? Despite the fact that he might be magic. But, of course, Prospero commands Caliban the whole time. I'm going to read a little bit from Ralph Waldo Emerson. It presently learns that since the dawn of history, there has been a constant accumulation and classifying of facts. But what is classification but the perceiving that these objects are not chaotic and are not foreign, but have a law which is also a law of the human mind? The astronomer discovers that geometry, a pure abstraction of the human mind, is the measure of planetary motion. The chemist finds proportions and intelligible method throughout matter, and science is nothing but the finding of analogy. Identity in the most remote parts. The ambitious soul sits down before each refractory fact. One after another reduces all strange constitutions, all strange powers, to their class and their law, and goes on forever to animate the last fiber of organization, the outskirts of nature, by insight. Well, I hesitate to tell you. I know that it's, I guess, dead air right now. I need to be saying something, but what does this have to do with the Movie Critic? What does this have to do with the Movie Critic? Quentin, right? Cancel the movie because of me, right? And then set me up to reveal myself by magic. And I was listening, and I was prepared. And I fucking blew it. Right? I just blew it in epic proportion. Right? I completely humiliated him. And that's not what I was, I wasn't thinking. I knew as soon as I even got out of the theater. Before I got out of the theater. There were people behind me. Right? But when he turned his back, right? And it was so arrogant. Was it arrogant? I don't know. I guess I'm just a coward, right? I guess, in my heart, I thought, I've waited all this time. He'll take my letter. He'll tell me what he wants. Right? And so, he turned his back. Right? All I had to say was I have a question about cinema speculation. I was ready. I read the book twice, watched all the movies. I had 10 badass questions. Right? But he turned his back on me. And so I was proud. I was proud. And so, originally, I was arrogant. Maybe the first correspondence, but by the second or third, the guilt was sitting on me really heavy. And I knew that I hurt him a lot. And I've done a lot. It's too much to really just kind of like go all the way into, now at this point. But, I blew it. He told me I blew it. Then the weeks passed. And again, like I sincerely believe he has my intellectual property in the movie, right? He's already made the movie. Maybe he hasn't made the movie. I think he's made most of the movie, or all of the movie, right? Right? The trade's published in 2023 that he was shooting the Movie Critic in September. However, right? We're in this situation now because the SAG strike lasted until Thanksgiving. So he didn't begin until December, the beginning of December, and he read my letters maybe December the 10th, somewhere around there. Right? So it had just begun. Perhaps they were even still in pre-production. But my point is that, right, that he was shooting the film, right? And so, right, I wrote him a bunch of pages, 70 fucking pages, in December, like when he halted his production and started accepting my mail. I'd cut my hair. It's all because of fucking hair. And that's bullshit, like, it's my fault. I can't stress that enough. I can't stress that enough. That, like, the reason that I am talking to the world now, right, and not like in relation to Quentin, right, is because of me. It's not because of him, right? But the condition between the two of us, that is because of him, right? Right, and it's just become so exacerbated. It's so fucking legendary, right? And I know that he lies to everyone. I know that this is how he is. I understand how he is, right? Took me a long time, but everything that he did after I heard him at Tribeca has been to A, destroy my character, make me seem as though I was completely insane, right? So he could point to it and say, oh, look, see, he's not well. Because he didn't want to tell them, right? That he did it through magic, right? That he didn't. Because if I would have had the piece of paper, right, where he said, hey, I want you to question me about cinema speculation, of course, I wouldn't have even asked for his autograph. Right? Right? Now, I don't think that I'm better than him. Let me say that too. That wasn't what I was thinking either. I know that that's what he thinks. That he thinks that in forgiving me, that he's admitting that I'm better than him. Right? And that's not what I want. That's not what I want. I wanted a shot. That's all I wanted, and he gave it to me. Right? All I had to do was relax. Right? So, anyway. But everything that he's done since then has been to make me seem insane, right? So that he doesn't have to admit he played Russian roulette and lost. And the second thing is so that I'd blow my brains out. There's no other way to interpret it, right? If you were paying attention earlier, right, to the pages, right? And you know anything about psychology, you'll know, right, that this, right, if someone crawls all the way into your mind, right? Like if you have someone that just, boom, through remote viewing, right? Like through magic, right? There is no formula psychologically, right, where it's healthy for them or the other person, right, for this to persist for 15 years, for 20 years. The last 20 years, 30 years of his life, God willing, 90, 100, I don't know. Of course, he's the only man I ever wrote. He's the first letters I ever sent. Now, I've written other people to help reconcile, like try to find reconciliation. I wrote Fish. I'll sing you a song in a second. So, hey, like, can I introduce myself on the band on stage with the band? And I know he slandered me. I know he did because I asked them to show me, and they had nothing to say. So, if it was just my letters, right? Why wouldn't they just show me my letters, right? And so, as we're moving forward, I suspect that a lot of people, if they're commenting, please comment, like, subscribe, share, like, etc., etc. They're gonna say that I'm schizophrenic, and that's fine. That's fine. When I posted one of the letters I've been sending to the Fish forum, they all said the same thing. Maybe some of them meant well. Most of them were just cynical jackasses. But what I'll say for the record is that they're all wrong. They're all wrong, right? That psychiatry actually can't help me. No, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way, right? If you have someone, right, who is remote viewing you, right, doesn't matter what drugs you take, right? And when you take those antipsychotic medications, right, that really all it does is make you sloppy and give them more control, right? That no matter what you tell a psychiatrist, no matter what pill you're eating, right? If someone wants to, right? They can still torture you. There's not, And when you go to the hospital, right, and say, the voices, I keep hearing the voices, like that's how you end up institutionalized forever, right? So, hospitals can't help me. All I can do is talk about it. And we'll talk more about it as I continue to read on the novel. I suppose I'll be singing a song and then reciting some Shakespeare, and then I'll probably leave. That's how I'm going to try to structure most of these videos, where I read this section, talk about what I liked, talk about what I didn't like, what I was writing about, my relationship with Quentin, all in an effort to just bring it to an amicable resolution, right? And then I'll sing a Fish song because they're involved, and I'll recite some Shakespeare because I'm an actor and I want to play Hamlet, I don't have to be a movie star, right? And I've told Quentin explicitly, oh, you know what? I will read one more thing, actually. Because he wanted me to sue, and so I've sued for $100 million. William Morris Endeavor, his agency. Right? This suit is being filed as a result of William Morris Endeavor's continued silence on the matter regarding my relationship with someone they represent, namely, Quentin Tarantino. I am the actual reason he canceled the film, The Movie Critic, last April. I published a 7,000-word essay which was extremely critical of Quentin, his previous film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, as well as his relationship with Brad Pitt, which I wrote after writing him 12 letters to the theater he owns in Los Feliz about playing the lead in The Movie Critic, and he thought it appropriate to give a press announcement that he and Brad Pitt were reuniting and stopped accepting my mail, which I considered callous and so decided to write about it. After publishing the essay, I began reviewing movies in protest under the Twitter hashtag Boycott the Movie Critic, and he canceled the film the day after posting my 4,500-word review of Gone with the Wind to his personal Twitter page @QTarantinoTweet. Following his canceling of the film, I have done nothing but strive towards communicating clearly with Quentin to give him whatever it is he needs from me, and he has done nothing but ignore me and, indeed, slander me. and do everything in his considerable power to destroy me. I have written numerous entities in an effort to help us come together and reconcile. However, it has become clear to me that his intention has always been to induce me to insanity, to destroy my reputation, and compel me to take my own life. So I'm seeking damages from the agency that represents him, William Morris Endeavor, to the amount of $100 million, because my psyche is permanently damaged as a result of the condition between myself and their client Quentin Tarantino, which they have insulated and enabled him to create, and even encouraged him to perpetuate, however tacit or explicit, is irrelevant. This is but one facet of legal culpability surrounding this ugly, novel ordeal. He also has intellectual property of mine. However, it is all-encompassing, and in filing this suit, I can resolve all the issues which surround it. I have done everything I could to avoid lawyers, to avoid lawsuits, but now I do live in fear for my safety with extreme PTSD, which will linger forever in tandem with other mental illnesses engendered by Quentin's treatment of me, insulated and incubated by his agency, William Morris Endeavor, specifically his agent Mike Simpson, as well as R. Emanuel, who have known about our relationship for some time. Either of them could have, and still can, at any time compel Quentin to bring this disgusting ordeal to an amicable resolution, and so I sue because I feel that I have no options left. So, that's the page that I wrote them, with all the other bullshit, like legal templates they want you to use. Right? And then sing a song, recite Shakespeare. Right? So we go through the book, right? Do some reading from the novel. Maybe read a little more Emerson, read some Plato. Talk about the movie critic. Talk about how it's developing. We're both at a breaking point now. It's been going on this whole time, and we're getting nowhere. And I do live in palpable fear of my life. Constantly. I have to, I have to do so much each day. And my tactics are becoming more sophisticated, to be sure. And this is another reason why I'm coming clean, right? Because it's time to talk about it. It's just dangerous. My mind, right? Right? My point is that there's no such thing as legal precedent for psychic assassination, and so the evil that he puts on me is above the laws of man, right? And so, I'm not interested in debasing myself. He's debased his immortal soul countless times now, right? But even still, I don't have to, right? My mind is crystallizing this thing to such a highly attenuated degree that I don't need to do any of those things, and I still can likely kill someone. So we're going to talk about it. It's my responsibility to be the guardian angel of the world. It's my responsibility to show the world this is the game. These are the things that are occurring, right? This is the potential for danger, right? This is what's required of those of you who would allege to be clairvoyant and wield power, okay? So rather than continuing to fester, right, on ways that I can obliterate Quentin's mind in retribution for his disgusting tactics against me, right? I'm going to talk about it in the light of day, right? There's no solution psychologically where the two of us don't come together, where we are in any way healthy. Both of us exist as phantoms in the other's mind, right? And he has several other people that he pays to torture me. Yes, while he was at Cannes doing his discussion panel about those two fucking films, right? Right? Boom, on me, right? I thought it was him, right? But then I looked up, and said, oh, I see. He didn't want to be thinking about me, right? So he paid Tweedledee and Tweedledum, right? Anyone can do it, right? So I read a little bit from the novel, we talk about it. I sing a song, I recite Shakespeare. And so. I think I'm out of tune. 1 second. You don't mind. I like to get it really out of tune. And then it helps me hear better when it's in tune. Bullshit guitar pick. This is my tracking number for my lawsuit, right? I'm also making these videos because I live in perpetual fear that he's going to send people to murder me, right? There's no more subtlety, right? This is another reason I'm coming clean, right? It's just vulgar evil now. Right? And so we'll get to that, you know, in the days and weeks to come. Right? But there's no more hiding, right? It's fine. It's fine. Right? It's fine. I'm a fucking loser. Right? Right? I'm the guardian angel of the world. I'm not a movie star. Right? And so, right? My other point, right, and then the real point in that last, you know, totally pretentious, arrogant statement on some level, is that any lesser of a man, right, would already be dead. Yes. Yes. That's the point. I don't care about power, right? I don't know, I wasn't thinking at all. Really, I wasn't. And I know he'll resent me forever, right? Because I hurt him. How could I fault him for that, right? Right? But I can fault him for trying to compel me to suicide, right? So we both failed our test, right? He makes his money this way, right? If he respected the truth that I told him, right? Oh, I'm really remorseful. I knew what time it was, right? If he actually respected that I told him the truth, right? He could have paid me nothing. $500,000 if that scene's in the movie, and it is. Obviously, it is. Made me sign a non-disclosure agreement and said, no, you blew it, dude. You blew it. I know you. You're a cool guy. You knew exactly what to do. Right? So you go fuck off and play your bullshit Hamlet somewhere in New Jersey. Right? And it would have hurt, would have cut right through me, but I would have said, okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Thank you for the opportunity. Right? But instead, right? I'm not going to go on and on about it for now, but he entered into a Faustian covenant to destroy me. Right? And so now there's no NDA, right? And that dollar amount, if they pay me, it's going to be substantial. Right? No more 1 million, no more $500,000. No. started a blaze from one tiny spark I didn't even detect. She loved the light, was dismayed by the dark, the stars though she seemed to respect. The faint light that flutters at night to the earth, land in her eyes and collect luminous creatures she'd find in the surf I never thought to inspect. Pebbles and marbles like things on my mind seem to get lost and harder to find. When I'm alone I am inclined, if I find a pebble in sand, to think that it fell from my hand. Gave me ideas, planted a seed. She never stopped to reflect. The course that she's on, wherever it leads, I never would redirect. Pebbles and marbles like words from a friend, make us hold tight but are lost in the end. When we're alone we all seem to tend, if we find a marble in dust, to wish someone left it for us. Pebbles and marbles like things on my mind seem to get lost and harder to find. When I'm alone I am inclined, if I find a pebble in sand, to wish that it fell from my hand. Pebbles and marbles like things on my mind. Pebbles and marbles like things on my mind. Of course, it's not the full song, but there's no need to do the jam. But it's a lovely song, Pebbles and Marbles. And so I'll leave you with Hamlet. The king doth wake tonight, and takes his rouse, keeps wassail in the swaggerting up spring reels, and as he drains his draughts of Rhenish down, the kettle, drum, and trumpet thus bray out the triumph of his pledge. Aye, merriest, but to my mind, though I am native here, and to the manner born, it is a custom more honoured in the breach than the observance. This heavy-headed revel, east and west, makes us traduced and taxed of other nations. They clip us drunkards, and with swinish phrase soil our edition. And indeed it takes from our achievements, though performed at height, the pith and marrow of our attribute. So oft it chances in particular men, that for some vicious mole of nature in them, as in their birth, wherein they are not guilty, since nature cannot choose her origin, by their o'ergrowth of some complexion oft breaking down the pales and forts of reason, or by some habit that too much o'erleavens the form of placid manners, that these men carrying, I say, the stamp of one defect, being nature's livery or fortune star, his virtues else be they as pure as grace, as infinite as men may undergo, shall in the general censure take corruption from that particular fault. The dram of ill doth all the noble substance of a doubt to his own scandal. Angels and ministers of grace, defend us. Be thou a spirit of health, or goblin damned, bring with thee airs from heaven, or blast from hell. Be thy intents wicked or charitable, thou comest in such a questionable shape that I will speak to thee. I'll call thee Hamlet, King, Father, Royal Dane, answer me! Let me not burst in ignorance, but tell why thy canonized bones, hearsed in death, have burst their cerements. Why the sepulchre wherein we saw thee quietly unyearned hath oped his ponderous and marble jaws to cast thee up again. What may this mean that thou, dead, coarse again in complete steel, revisits thus the glimpses of the moon, making night hideous? And we fools of nature so heartily to shake our dispositions with thoughts beyond the reaches of our souls, say, why is this? Wherefore? What?